Brooks Running has a new shoe for you runners out there. Did you hear that? Better turn up your volume. In fact, turn it up to the max. Introducing the all-new Ghost Max. It's got all kinds of things to make your knees and ankles feel protected, like Max Cushion, Max Soft Landings with DNA Loft V2 foam, and Max Smooth Rides with their Glide Roll Rocker. Feel better on your run with Ghost Max. Learn more at brooksrunning.com.
Maruchan superfans are everywhere. From the busy moms who want to deliver maximum flavor in a flash to dorm room diners who want to put some slurp in their step. There are a ton of copycats you could use, but if you want to bless your bowl, there's only one true Maruchan. Whether you choose instant lunch, ramen bowls, yakisoba, or restaurant quality gold, Maruchan is the only ramen worth obsessing over. Smiles for all. Maruchan. See what all the ramen hype is about at maruchan.com.
Why can't I drink like a normal person? Why is it that I see my friends going for a jog on a Sunday morning and I'm lying in my bed unable to move my head for 15 hours in between, visits to the bathroom? I couldn't understand why I wasn't able. Why can't I do this? That was really one of the main questions. And that was the problem. That's why I didn't stop, because I was just trying to learn. I wanted to train myself to be a good boozer. It was a massive mistake I made for many, many years. It was like, oh yeah, I'll have waters between wines, and then I'll do dry July, and then I'll have paracetamol before I go to bed and a pint of water. I was trying all the time to be an excellent boozer so that I wasn't going to get anxiety the next day. And it just wasn't reality for me, because I would go out and I'd see friends sipping on a glass of wine when I'd be up, they'd had that one glass the whole evening and I would have been to the bar 5 times. And I used to stand at the bar looking back at my friends going, how come they're all sitting there all normal and looking all pretty still, and I'm all blotchy with red wine stained teeth, wanting to go to a nightclub? I couldn't understand where I was going wrong, but actually it was because I was drinking 5 times more than everybody else. And I saw them and I wanted to be like them and I couldn't. So that was one of the main questions I asked myself in those moments was, why can't I drink like a normal person? Why do I keep doing this myself? And the one that really led me to seek help was, why am I being a shit parent? Because of course, on Sundays, I wasn't able to function as a normal human being. And I'd had to listen to my darling husband take my children out for the day. I used to hear the front door slam and realise that they were going off to have a day without me. And that was really the question that I realised that I needed to seek professional help for, because I didn't want to be that one. I didn't want to be that person. I didn't want to be that mum. So that was really the question that stung my heart. The other ones had been going on for years, but that was the one that made me reach out for help.
Yeah, when you realise that your drinking is affecting your children,
Absolutely.
It's just devastating. And
Yeah.
What's interesting is that you realised that when your kids were quite young, but I actually carried on drinking right through until their teenage years. And they do get more affected when they're older because they're more aware of what you're doing. You can't hide that glass of wine.
I just reminded me of something, Lucy, that we talked about before, was you telling us about your daughter writing you a letter. I think we could talk about that quickly now. That realization is going to be a lot of women out there, especially listening to this podcast, and men as well, who have reached a point in their drinking where it's affecting their children, and especially if their children are your kids' age, where they're starting to know what drinking is and they're starting to go out a bit more. What was it? Can you tell us that your daughter said to you when you? Lucy's been sober for 6 months. I've been sober for 3 years. So we're on a different page, but we're still in that awkward area of giving up drinking, where we're learning to socialize and we are having to have these conversations with our kids. What was it your daughter said?
Yeah, so I've got 2 daughters, one of whom has just turned 15 and the oldest is 17. And it was the youngest daughter. In fact, both of them sent me a message and they were both really sweet and supportive of me giving up drinking. And honestly, they are so proud of me. I will just say that. But Ruby, in her message to me, said some things along the lines of how she didn't worry about me all the time. She wrote that message shortly after I had gone out for the night with a girlfriend and fallen off a wall and given myself a black eye. And she said that she was always worried about when I went out, that she stayed awake to see if I'd come home and whether I was in bed. And more often than not, I wasn't. I didn't come home till the very, very early hours. And she just said she worried about me all the time. So I'd really reversed the roles between parent and child. She was looking out for me. And I didn't do that really, really heavy drinking a lot, but I did it enough that I think she was constantly alert as to what was going to happen next with mum. I mean, they've seen me in all sorts of states, and I can only hope that it serves to put them off drinking in excess.
As I always say, you have to call me in 18 years when my child is phoning me from a jail cell. I'm like, obviously, I hope my legless legacy lives on so that the children don't drink, but we'll have to see how that goes. Well, hopefully our podcast will be on for 18 years, Lucy, and I'll be able to report back and see whether my children are not big drinkers. We'll see. But I'll be interesting, won't it?
I'll be a very smug, sober person if I'm still sitting here in 18 years talking about sobriety.
I hope so. What was the questions that came up, going back to the questions that we were asking, when you're feeling that awkward moment of realisation where your drinking isn't working for you anymore, it's not your best buddy. What were the questions that you asked yourself, Lucy?
Look, very similar to you around moderation, Vic. I just tried so bloody hard to be a normal drinker, exactly the same. I was sitting here nodding in agreement as you were talking earlier, because I'd look at people in the bar and I'd think, how are they so together? They're still drinking, but they're not overdoing it. And I have to admit, embarrassingly, I thought they were a bit boring, which is just so ridiculous. I feel stupid saying it, but they weren't. They were just sensible. They were enjoying a drink, but they weren't overdoing it like we always were. And I think we're going to do a whole different podcast about moderation, aren't we? Because
definitely, that's a massive issue. I think and also we can do another podcast about how we hated sober people before we were sober ourselves.
That's a brilliant topic.
I didn't want people remembering my night if I couldn't. I didn't want anybody there who was going to be pointing at me on that dance floor when I was rolling around. I didn't want someone coming to me the next day and telling me what I was doing. So being around sober people was very, very confronting for me, which I guess is another awkward thing that we can discuss another time.
Yeah. And again, it takes us back to what we were discussing earlier on about surrounding ourselves by people who were the same as us with their drinking, if not, and ideally worse, because it made us look better.
Well, also, I berated people in the pub if they weren't having a drink. I'm very guilty of that. And it's one of the things I really regret now in my sobriety, is that I was so awful to people that didn't drink. I mean, people aren't like that to me, so I don't know why I had the right to do that. But even if someone was really ill, I'd be like, come on, have a hot toddy, I'll put some whiskey in it. I'd be like, go on, a couple of glasses of wine, you forget you've got a cold. I was that person. So I do really regret that, but there's nothing I can do about it. So I do apologise to everybody that I did that to, because that was an awful thing to do. And
a public apology on the first podcast. There might be quite a few apologies on this podcast series about all the awful and disgraceful and embarrassing things we've done in our time.
Maybe we should just do one big apology one day and just say to all the exes, to all those awful one-night stands that we had, sorry about that.
Sorry. To all the bartenders who we begged for another drink when we could barely stand.
To the police officers that arrested us. I mean, we won't give away too much now, but I promise there are a few good stories coming up in the next few podcasts.
There are some amazing stories. And just following on from what you said about that, I can remember going out, and perhaps my friend I was going out with had decided not to drink that night. That was such a downer, going out with, even if I could drink. And in fact, what's so interesting now is that I'm exactly the same. If I go out with a group of people who are drinking, I feel more comfortable once they've got a few drinks under their belts or they're a little bit tipsy. That actually makes me feel better being around them like that. So that's just, there are a lot of habits that we need to get out of as we take our sober journey, because these habits are so ingrained. I was just going to say, Vicky, that what's quite interesting about my questions was that my questions were your questions. I just spent a lot longer blocking them out. So a lot of people are blocking out those questions. If you're listening in and you feel, I probably have been asking myself those questions, but I'm blocking them out, it's perfectly normal to do it. That's what we do. That's what Vicky and I did. And everybody that we talked to in our sober group, exactly the same, aren't they, Vic? We just block out the questions. We don't want to deal with it. We don't know how to deal with it. We haven't got the tools. And again, that's the kind of thing we want to be able to say, look, you're perfectly normal. You know, so many people do drink too much. So many people have problems. It's just about understanding what those red flags are and to accept them and to reach for help.